Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding podcast, podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in the personal injury, trucking law, workers' compensation, immigration, and all other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. In today's episode, I have an honor to be presenting Nathan Gaffney, attorney with Fried Goldberg, partner of the Fried Goldberg, who principally works on major cases for many years, and then guess Nathan can go deeper into that in just a moment. And he has leadership positions, a few leadership positions on a few AI or artificial intelligence committees nationwide. Today we'll be specifically focusing our attention on artificial intelligence or AI's skills and demand in general and in legal practice, current state and near future projections. And as we all know, AI is a relatively new thing. So there's a lot of debate, many debates going around the world and specifically in the legal world. So it's a hot topic we'll be discussing today. So you better listen up. Welcome again to Sign for More Injury Funding podcast, Nathan.
Thank you, Laura. I'm very glad to be here. So basically, to give you an idea of why I'm talking today about AI and my role in our firm is, I think Michael and Joe would agree with me that I'm our firm's pet nerd. I'm the lead nerd of our firm. And as a result, it would be fitting for the lead nerd to be the person who has to tackle AI, I think. Thank you so much for having me. I am really looking forward to discussing artificial intelligence in the practice of law because we are really in an interesting time. I am the chair of a couple of national committees. One is going to be ATAA's AI committee, and the other is going to be TLG, which is an arm of AAJ's truck law group.
And can you, Nathan, decipher for those who don't know what the ATA and the other one?
Yes, ATA is the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys. It's a national organization that exists to help personal injury lawyers develop truck practices across the country. And AAJ's truck law group is a similar organization. Both organizations sort of further, our ability to recover on behalf of people that have been catastrophically injured by truck wrecks and make the industry a safer place, and so on and so forth.
Okay, and AAJ is American Association for Justice.
Correct.
I'm sure most of us know, but for those who do not. So let's start, Nathan, our conversation with a comparison.
Okay.
So how has the legal profession historically adopted technology, and where does AI fit in today compared to earlier innovations? Let's say maybe word processing, some research databases, discovery, or anything else.
So I think some of the older lawyers are probably going to impeach what I'm about to say, but based on what I can remember, I think the legal industry is usually pretty slow historically to adopt technology. Let's look at the internet. It's a great sort of guide to answer or a good thing to refer to in answering this question. The internet has been around for a long time, but it was not widely used in legal research until I think probably the 90s. I know in the 80s, LexisNexis launched, I think, in the 80s and was used, but it really wasn't until I graduated the first year of law school, 2005, that they stopped teaching lawyers to research using the books. We were the last class, I want to say, at Georgia State's law school that actually had to go to the digest to look and research topics. And I don't, for any of the younger lawyers that are listening right now,
don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the older lawyers know what I'm talking about. But the way you used to have to do legal research is you'd have to go to digest where you look at topics of what cases and reference materials, and then you have to go to the digest and go to volumes of books and look for cases. It was kind of a difficult and there was a complicated process, and there was an art form to it in and of itself. Well, they used to make lawyers still do this the first year of law school for a long time because they wanted to make sure that lawyers knew how to do this manually without a computer. Absolutely. Well, the last year I was in law school was the last year they did it. They decided that finally we'd reached a point where the legal industry had adopted the internet, had adopted LexisNexis and Westlaw, and that we were never going to go back and we didn't need to use the hard books.
Look at that.
So I think that's probably a great example of it takes, 20, 30, sometimes a really long time before our industry will really adopt a new technology.
Just thinking of, I think it was last year where Fulton County was out of touch because of an issue. And you guys are in Fulton County, is that right?
Yeah, are you talking about the hacking attack?
Yes.
That occurred? Yes.
Sponsor Sandy Springs Bar Association, and we had one of the judges, actually the highest judge, talking about that, of course, with really good, great sense of humor. But that was mind blowing that everything was based online, and attorneys had to submit their paperwork manual for longest time. I don't know, it took maybe 6 or more even months. So.
And I think that one of the ways that causes, because this is a good transition, why does it take so long?
Yeah.
Right. And the reason why it takes so long is when you're dealing with a professional industry that's based on professional judgment and skill. I think older generations of lawyers get concerned that whenever we introduce new technology, we're eroding the skill of this profession. And so there's usually some resistance, particularly from really good, skillful lawyers on adopting new technology, because if they became skillful and successful doing it the quote manual right way, a lot of times they are resistant to anything that may be more efficient or that may be just something that's out of their comfort zone.
Totally, absolutely. And I'm still myself using paper. I still love my paper, but I do love my AI as much as I love my paper. And now the question is which one I like more, but I still could not live. I'm old school, so I could not live without paper yet. Nathan, when we think about current capabilities from your perspective as a trial lawyer, what specific AI tools are most impactful in personal injury practice? Let it be discovery review, case research, maybe motion drafting, jury research, anything else, and why?
Can I back up for just a second?
Absolutely.
So I want to address this question, but one of the things I want to talk about is just sort of because we're in I want to talk about the uniqueness of this time period and why it's unique, and why this podcast is timely. So we're at a point right now where the AI space in the practice of law is it's loud. Artificial intelligence is all over legal marketing. I mean, right now, whoever's listening to this, you probably have 50 emails in your inbox that is spam of someone trying to sell you or market to you an AI product. While at the same time, you've got all this AI noise going on in legal marketing, you're also hearing and seeing career-ending sanction orders coming out from federal courts and state courts. You're seeing draft ethics opinions, and you're also seeing standing orders from judges now. They're starting to ask things like for you to certify whether or not you've used generative AI in producing a document. When you put those two things together, the marketing, the loudness of the marketing and the scariness of the orders, I think most lawyers right now have a lot of anxiety about this topic. It's one of the reasons why I created these committees or am chairing these committees and doing this podcast is I want to start a dialogue with lawyers about this, because I personally was tired of having fear about it. I was tired of not knowing about what parts of AI work, what parts of AI are good use cases in the practice of law, and what parts of AI are bad use cases. What's the right mentality to have when you're using artificial intelligence? All these things, I think, it's time to have a discussion as a profession about these things now, because I don't really see a lot of people talking about them online. I see people talking about the theoretical uses of AI and how their practices are using it, but I don't see a lot of people talking about getting into the weeds of the consequences and the risks.
So true, and so I believe, and if I understand correctly, your purpose or part of your mission being on these couple huge committees is to create some kind of guidance for attorneys. And of course, I'm sure you will be, expecting and hoping for some input, getting together some brainiacs who love this topic, and because it's so relevant. So any input I believe would be appreciated. When we can have some good discussions and come up with suggestions.
And really, the committees are existing not for the brainiacs. I'm not interested in really producing material for people that are early adopters of generative AI. Really, the largest group of people who our committees are speaking to are the people who have been on the sidelines. Maybe they personally use ChatGPT or Gemini or something in their personal life. Maybe they've asked it some questions about something they're working on in the practice of law, but they haven't really done a lot with it. And they don't really know what to do about it. But they have this fear that if they don't start doing things with generative AI, they'll be replaced by generative AI. And so it's that group of people that I want to speak to, that I want to help get caught up on what are the best use cases and what are the risks.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I'm so glad you, Nathan, doing that.
So I know, I can tell you my practice is a lot different than a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast. I only have a very few number of cases. They're all major catastrophic cases against larger corporations and things. And so my use cases for artificial intelligence are going to be vastly different than someone who has a higher caseload, who has a higher volume practice. And my knowledge of AI tools and uses is by virtue of the fact that I'm on these committees and I've talked to other members of the committees who use products. So when I speak about this, it's not necessarily something that I'm using in my practice, but it's what I'm hearing from our members. It seems as though that the best use and the safest use of AI right now, in my opinion, is going to be in pre-litigation tasks. The reason why is the AI tools are good or better, they're farther along at doing things like drafting demands, making medical chronologies, organizing medical billing, coming up with damages information, coming up with graphics and charts and things for demands. But the biggest reason why I say pre-litigation is because you're not submitting anything directly to a court. And so if, for example, in a demand letter, you're incorrect about something that you've said, let's say there's a minor hallucination. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. But let's say there's something inaccurate in the demand that has been caused by the AI. It's unlikely that it's going to be something, it could be, but it's unlikely that it's going to be something that is going to cause you to ever get sanctioned or cause a problem. Just be wrong, right?
So quick question on this topic. So let's say you are in front of judge at whatever, step of the case. And judge asks you, Nathan, have you used AI? And if you say yes, is that good or bad at this particular time?
So it's a great question. We're transitioning a little bit from that question, but this is an awesome question to ask. So my answer is going to upset some people probably. At this point in time, I do think that if you had to tell a judge that used generative AI to draft work product, that it would raise eyebrows. It's just the reason why is that you got to consider what's most of the judiciary think of AI right now. And most of the judiciary tends to be from an older generations, not always, but they tend to be older in the profession. They tend to not necessarily be using AI a lot, would be my guess. It's not true. I mean, there's some judges that are all over AI, but just we're talking in general. I think that if we're talking in generalities, that if you say you use generative AI, you better be prepared to absolutely defend everything in that document. If you're submitting it to a court. Now, when I was talking about what I think of the lowest risk use cases are, it's pre-litigation, because pre-litigation typically isn't going to be sent to a court. I mean, you might attach a demand to a pleading at some point, but it's not the same thing. You're not always putting things like cases and things into demands. And I just think that it is, and I think a lot of lawyers agree with me, I've spoken to across the country, it's less risky at this point. The tools work better too. There is a term, and I hope people find this interesting, but what is the difference between something like ChatGPT and all these other products that you guys see marketed in the legal space? And the difference is you have really three different categories of products. I don't want to go into this too long, but
just kind of summarize and mention them for this purpose.
So we have general use AI products like that are called learning language models, LLMs, and they are things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude. Those are general use. They're made for many different industries, right? They're made for everyone to use. And then the next tier down, though, are industry-specific AI tools. They're called domain-specific or vertical generative AI tools. Those tools will be things like counsel, which is like an AI tool that's designed for lawyers, Supio, many of you have heard of, Even Up, Anytime AI. If any of you have gone to any conferences recently, maybe you see these vendors out there. Those are all domain-specific or vertical generative AI tools that are designed for the practice of law. So some people think that they're a bit safer than using something like ChatGPT for these pre-litigation tasks. Then we have the third tier down, and it's going to be called micro-vertical or task-specific AI. That is the most sort of detailed task-oriented AI product that's going to be out there. It's going to be something like a demand AI tool that all it does is you upload demand materials, it generates a demand work product, or you upload medical records and it generates a medical chronology. Those tools are just limited to certain use cases. It appears that those vertical, micro-vertical, and task-specific AI tools for pre-litigation tasks, as well as the domain-specific tools, Supio, Even Up, Anytime AI. For the most part, we hear good reports that on pre-litigation tasks that those products do a pretty good job. They all do a really good job. I'm not specifically saying one is better than the other, but that they seem to have those pre-litigation tasks down to a point where they can be done consistently, safely, and reliably.
And thank you so much, Nathan, for breaking down in 3 categories. And, at some point, if you're interested, we could come up with some additional episodes specifically going into details. And I'm sure these will become so much wider and so many more will show up because it's happening. AI is happening and progressing as we speak.
Yes.
It's insane. And I love this. It's a new thing. And, we had this conversation before we started our episode. It's, usually humans, us, are afraid of unknown, just like anything else. Like, who in the world could have imagined that there will be self-driving vehicles? I did not. That was a sci-fi futuristic movies. It's happening. They're already on the street.
I took a what do you call those? What are the autonomous? I took an autonomous vehicle from the Fulton County Courthouse. I thought that was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
You scared from?
It's the second time I've ridden in one because they're Waymos. I've ridden in them in Arizona. I know they do pretty well. I was impressed in Atlanta. Atlanta's got different terrain. It's got more hills. It was downtown Atlanta, and it seemed like it did fine. I didn't get stuck in an intersection like scoop or anything.
Somebody was going around. Round for a couple hours, but it's amazing. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's hot. It's happening, and it's happening as we speak. How is artificial intelligence used to screen potential clients, access case viability, and prioritize matters? And what safeguards ensure ethical compliance and client confidentiality?
There's a lot that we could respond to in that question. As far as the potential screening of clients, I don't have a lot of input on that because we don't have a volume. I mean, we do have clients that come in. But one thing I can speak on that I bet a lot of the people listening to this podcast have experienced. I've talked to several firms, and our firm has had this experience several times. It's the sheer number of people who are using ChatGPT to locate us. And what I think you have to look at, and I'm not an SEO expert, I'm not claiming to be one. Joe knows way more about this than I certainly do, but I took a call the other day that was an intake where someone said they had a full-on conversation with ChatGPT about the scenario that their family was faced with, and then they asked for, what the best trucking law firm was. The difference between that type of inquiry and the inquiry that you're getting on Google is Google's like it's like one little question, whereas this person's having a full-on dialogue and giving lots of different parameters. And so I think that there is a lot of work to be done sort of in the search engine optimization space, in terms of whether or not the traditional Google approach to things is the future, is going to work or works with AI, I think is an open question. I'm not sure if any of the users have more information on that, but it is definitely one of the hotter topics. You also mentioned ethics, which is the other thing that I heard.
Yes.
And accessing viability and sort of doing case analysis kind of stuff. We probably should have started with ethics, because the problem with sort of assessing case viability and using AI to do an analysis like that is that if you are not an expert in the field, that you are having it do the analysis in, you can't verify the output. That's probably the very first principle of ethics in AI is if you're doing something with it that you're not an expert in, then you won't know whether it is telling you the truth or not. And so, for example, it would be a very bad idea for an attorney who doesn't practice trucking law to assume that just because they get a superficial understanding of trucking law from ChatGPT, that they can suddenly handle a trucking case. If you didn't know the regs to begin with, then you're unlikely to be able to tell whether or not ChatGPT's recitation of the regs are correct. And that's the first and foremost principle you need to know. So you can't really use AI ethically to determine, whether a case is viable or not, unless it's something that's within your area of expertise. I haven't heard of too many lawyers like doing a full-on sort of analysis like that. What I do have seen is I've seen people who use prompting and complex prompts in LLMs to try to gather information on defendants. So, for example, I've seen people who write complex prompts when they get a trucking case, and the prompt will basically ask, Safer Sys, which is a government organization database, Find Law, and several different other publicly available and sort of databases about the trucking company that's at stake. That certainly, and that certainly could help you assess the viability of the case, but it would only be something that would make sense to you if you knew how to interpret, Safer Sys and what's online in the first place. So, in terms of, you also asked about safeguards with ethical compliance, and I think that's the first safeguard. The safeguard is you need to make sure that AI doesn't become your vehicle to attempting a subject matter that you're not an expert in. If you want to do that in your personal life, that's fine. But when we're talking about your professional judgment, it's a really bad idea.
100%. You have to. It's still so. The summarize your what you just said, Nathan. It's you have to be expert in your field, and you lead the AI, not vice versa.
And it kind of goes to a general philosophy on the use of AI that some people may disagree with me. Most of my friends nationally that talk to me about AI, I think Sam Altman would agree with this actually in hearing his interviews, is at this point, I don't think it's a good idea for a lawyer to think of AI as outsourcing any of your judgment. It's better to think of AI or automating any of your judgment. It's much healthier and better for you to think of AI as enhancing your brain. Like think of it more as a ghost runner for your brain than think of it as something that's going to do your work for you. I do these little AI like comics sometimes online, and one of the comics I'll do is I'll have a guy who's like maybe he's like fat sitting in a lounge chair with a little drink with an umbrella, and an AI bot is handing him everything on a silver platter. And what I would say is that is an inaccurate way to look at AI. Instead, the better way to look at AI is the other side of the comic would be someone who's in really good shape, running really fast with a ghost runner. That is the better way to look at it. Whatever effort you put into it, you're going to get a better output. Like it's not like, and I was just talking to someone about this the other day, the popular perception and what most people are interested in is sort of automating it so they can do less work. And I think that what we are here to say is that right now, that's not a really good use of it. It's better to use it to think deeply.
Since we're talking, Nathan, about ethics, what ethical guidelines govern the use of AI in law, particularly regarding client data, biases, transparency, and the duty of competence? And we both know this topic, again, is hot.
This is a very hot topic, and there are a lot of different angles that my brain could go in answering it. But let me just start with, currently, I do not believe there is a state bar that has an official, maybe Florida, Texas, and I think the New York City State Bar in California have all issued opinions of some sort giving guidance on the use of generative AI in the practice of law. There is an American Bar Association opinion that came out in 2024. It's called ABA Opinion 512. It is a long and scary opinion. It's sort of what it does is it goes through all the rules of ethics and professional responsibility. And it essentially goes through each one of them that AI could affect. And it starts with lawyer competence. It goes to supervisory attorneys and their roles with supervising their paralegals and associate attorneys. And it also talks about candor to the court. There are a lot of different things. So I don't want to make it seem like in discussing this opinion, I'm necessarily giving all the details of of all the pitfalls of things that people need to be worried about. The opinion is accessible online if you want to find it. But to hit the highlights, the first thing it says is that you need to be trained in generative AI. Like something that people are overlooking is if you can't just like use AI in a professional setting when you don't understand how to use it. And so one of the things that the opinion talks about is you need to become competent with using generative AI. Meaning you might need to get a certification if it exists, or you might need to at least go through training. Like for example, our firm has Lexis Protege, which is, I'm going to talk more about later. And we've also used the Westlaw AI products as well. Those products are probably some of the safest products to use, but you've got to make sure that in using those products, you have tight sort of firm guidelines on how to use those. What are the risks of using those? And you also got to make sure that your firm is trained on using them. We're having live training. We have live training set up to make sure that everyone who's using Lexis Protege knows how to use it. And then we could say they've been trained. That's the very first thing that the ethics opinion talks about. Because a lot of people overlook that step. They just think that, there's no skill set you need when you dive into using LLMs, and that's just not true.
And that's something maybe that could be also introduced to your breakfast.
That could be
an expert, and then just introduce little by little. I'm sure everybody probably at the first session would be a little scared and skeptical, or excited and scared. But going forward, if you continue introducing it, those knowledgeable people, I think somebody needs to do it.
Well, let me also say this: in discussing these scary things, I think that there are going to be some people that they don't want to hear me talk about the scary stuff. No one is here to tell you that you shouldn't use generative AI in your practice. What the purpose of this is just to inform you of how bad it could get, what the pitfalls are, and what you need to be aware of that somebody or some government entity may be arguing about you someday. In addition to competence, ABA Opinion 512 talks about supervisory attorneys, and it talks about how you need to have a conversation with your staff about using AI. Human beings are human beings, and if they find out there's a tool that will allow them to summarize something, they are likely to use it unless you tell them they can't. Right now, I don't want anyone who's working for me using any kind of artificial intelligence to do any kind of human work product that would involve summarization or anything. I don't want that. We don't need that in our practice. You may need it in yours, but we don't outsource the technology like that right now. And I'm not saying that it won't ever come a day when we will do that, but we have a conversation with our staff about it because we want to make sure that they know what our position is, which is what the opinion is focused on in part.
And I like that you made it clear, so I appreciate it.
The other thing that I think you got to know too is a lot of these opinions, by the way, these opinions are informal. So they're just guidance right now. It doesn't mean that your state bar couldn't, or the state bar couldn't come after you for one of these issues. It's just guidance. The other thing I think that you need to consider is they really want you to tell your clients when you're using generative AI on their cases. That's sort of the guidance that a lot of the American Bar Association has given, that you probably at some point need to probably incorporate into your fee agreements some type of statement that you may use generative AI. Not saying this has to happen right away, but I'm saying that it's something that has been talked about. In addition, defense attorneys have the ethical issues of billing. They have a whole complicated universe of, if they're using AI tools, it affects their billing arrangements with their clients. And so they are having to navigate those waters, but there's a whole section of the ethics opinion on that. So I don't want to bore people by talking about ethics, but just to say that there's a lot of different sources of guidance right now. And in fact, the Florida State Bar's opinion, I believe, does not tell people they can't use AI.
Interesting.
I think it specifically says that they can.
Okay.
It just they have to use it smartly.
Interesting. So we have to have conversation with Florida.
Yes.
For the notes.
Yeah.
AI can produce, like you, Nathan, said, confident for I guess uneducated or very little educated with AI person, but incorrect outputs.
Correct.
How do you mitigate hallucinations and verify AI generated content and ensure factual accuracy in filings and communications?
So when I was talking about ethics, I bypassed pander to the tribunal, which is really what goes hand in hand with the concept of hallucinations. I'll just define what a hallucination is for everybody, even though I think most of you know. A hallucination is essentially when AI has made up something. It doesn't exist. There are lots of reasons why this happens, but one thing that you should be aware of is that the AI is kind of programmed to be sort of affirmative, and it's supposed to try to like give you what you want. And in the course of doing that, it will hallucinate and give you cases that don't exist, or it's sometimes, and this is what you got to be worried about, probably more than just cases that don't exist. It also will give you cases that exist, but they're misquoted, or they just frankly make up what is inside of that case. There was a recent federal court opinion that came out in Arizona that was pretty scary, and it included, a lawyer had included several hallucinated cases in a brief.
Wow.
3 of them were just totally made up, but the court went on and it went into detail on other cases, like actual cases that exist that were cited in the brief, but were misquoted. There were quotes that were attributed to the case that did not exist in the case, or there were statements that were made like in parentheticals about the case that were not accurate. And the court said that those violations were as bad or almost as bad as the made up cases, because at the end of the day, you are making a false representation to a federal court. And the other scary thing about the opinion is it said it did not matter what your intent was. Of course, every lawyer who gets accused of this, first thing they're going to say is, I didn't mean to. And what I'm saying is the opinions that are coming out, they don't seem like they really care so much that you didn't mean to. The orders are very, very, very harsh in the sanctions. I refer to them as kind of career ending in the sense that they're making you basically get publicly reprimanded, get referred to your state bar. And then the sort of the thing that really is difficult is if you are a lawyer who's pro-hacked in, that a lot of times they'll make you send the copy of the order to every one of your opposing counsel that you have in every single case. And you can imagine what will happen once that order comes to them. They'll probably make a bunch of accusations against you in other cases. So yeah, these issues are really, really difficult. You asked what safeguards we can put in place. And I think the first thing we have to do is we have to change how we approach writing briefs, or how we approach writing our work product if we're going to use generative AI. The first thing that you have to understand about it, and I don't use generative AI to write briefs, to be clear. If we're using generative AI, I might use it to develop some thoughts here and there. But right now, what I am doing is I have been talking with a lot of lawyers and sort of researching what are leaders in the industry saying is the best way to generate like a substantive work product with it. And the main thing that you have to do is you have to front load your effort, meaning you have to put way more effort into the planning of the document than you ever would if you were writing it like a human. What am I talking about? It's things like assembling all your authorities, your legal authorities, your cases in PDFs before you've even written anything, putting them in a directory and then pinning them to your LLM and saying, hey, these are the authorities. Don't go outside these authorities. It's things like having a long dialogue with the LLM about what the purpose of what you're generating is, who you are, what jurisdiction you're in, guidance on, the specific tasks that you are doing. Like, in other words, if you treat AI like it's an associate attorney, like it's a first or second associate attorney, think of the amount of time that you have to spend talking to that attorney and their lack of familiarity with the orientation and practice of law, that effort, all that effort has to go into the front end of preparing a generative AI brief. I can't get into the details of it right here because I don't have a computer and a mouse, but I can tell you that it's the setup of your workflow, like almost like it's a blueprint, is what you're going to have to start thinking of if you're going to generate substantive documents using generative AI.
Totally makes sense. Thank you, Nathan. All right, Nathan. So I want to pick your brain and look into the near future to see what tools we should expect to see in the next, let's say, I want to say maybe 12 to 24 months. I know it's very hard to predict, considering how fast AI progression is going on and how fast it's moving forward. Which AI capabilities do you anticipate becoming mainstream for personal injury practice? Maybe we could think of automated deposition summaries, smarter damage calculators, AI-assisted expert affidavits, and how will they affect the time spent on each case and case outcomes?
So the most obvious thing, great question, is things like automated deposition summaries are already here. The question becomes, how accurate they are. And I think what you're going to see in the coming next 12 to 24 months is further refinements. If any of you have been, any of the listeners and viewers have been like demoing AI products, one of the things they can tell if they've been in contact with any of these marketers is they're constantly telling these things are up to. And so the real use cases are already out there. Deposition summaries, medical chronologies, demand letters, those types of things. But I think what you're going to see is you're going to see further refinement of those products. You're going to see them become more accurate. You're going to see the turnaround times for the work product to be to maybe improve. And really, you may see some replacement. I think I saw a statistic saying that they believe, and don't quote me on this, that 17% of the legal profession may be replaced at some point by generative AI. I think that the tasks that sort of AI is really good at right now are probably going to be the tasks for the most task-oriented people in your office. So the lowest level people that are like summarizing things or sort of organizing things, AI does those things pretty well. And in the next 12 to 24 months, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see refinements in those tasks. So you'll see more solo practitioners probably deciding, well, maybe I don't need a secretary or administrative assistant to do these things like AI to do it for me.
Or even the receptionist now, these incoming calls, somebody screen. I was talking, can't remember to whom recently, to a plaintiff's attorney a couple of days ago, where, he's using whatever AI system. And so he no longer has receptionist. Me personally, I'm old school. I like to have, when I walk into the office, to have somebody sitting there and smiling beautifully, or, offering coffee or a cup, or water. But that's my opinion. But other than that, like you said, yes. And it's 17% is actually on the low side. I thought that percentage would be much higher. Well,
you also put in your AI-assisted expert affidavits, and I just wanted to comment on that briefly. So there's actually a few cases nationally where experts have been challenged using generative AI. I would advise most people to avoid using generative AI for something like an expert affidavit at this point in time. The reason why is, the efficiency, the gains that you get with efficiency and maybe the improvement of the substance may not be worth the risk of if it comes out in a deposition that it was generated with AI. There's just such a stigma about it right now that you just need to be prepared to deal with that. And so I would kind of avoid it. Like one of the things when I give expert presentations is I tell people now, if you have an expert witness, have a dialogue with them about like, hey, you can't use ChatGPT to summarize my depositions. I need you to read them with your human eyes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When we think of long-term vision, let's say 3 to 5 years out, in the past we would say 5 to 10 years, but let's stay within 2, 3, 5 years from today. What roles do you foresee artificial intelligence playing in trial strategy, client relationships, and firm operations for a nationally established practice like yours at Fried Goldberg?
So these are all things that I've heard and that I know that they're in the works. Right now you hear lawyers talk about using AI for trial strategy. You hear them talk about using it for jury selection and all these things. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, what you're likely to see is probably more products coming out geared toward things like jury selection. I think there's already a few. And in terms of client relationships, I think that a huge thing that you're going to see is avatars.
What is avatars?
So an avatar is an AI generated version of yourself. I have one that I've created. I use it for educational purposes at this point in time, just to show other lawyers how they can do it. But essentially what you do is you shoot high resolution film of yourself and you use an avatar generation tool. And what that allows you to do is I can really literally type anything into a box and then an AI version of myself will speak it.
And I'm a witness of that. I think I've seen it on Facebook a few days ago. And knowing that, knowing quite a bit about AI, I could tell, but not really. So for somebody who doesn't have much experience with AI, it looked 100% realistic.
Yeah, if you don't know me, if you knew me, you would probably think that something was a little off. If you don't know me, it's a pretty good representation of me. Now, there's some problems with this that we have to figure out as an industry. Is first of all, what are our clients' reception to this going to be?
Yes.
If a client finds out that you're speaking to them using generative AI, I think you need to worry that they're going to be upset at you, that you're not providing the personal touch to their needs. And the other thing I think we need to worry about is we need to probably disclose. Every time I do an AI generated thing, I always say this has been generated with AI. Because I think most human beings, most courts, most people, they do not, one of the things they don't like about generative AI is they don't like being misled by it. They don't like people that try to mislead people.
Yes.
And so in using avatars and stuff in the future, we're going to have to figure out, or we're going to have to kind of normalize its use with our clients, but where I think we can do it.
Sounds good. One of the biggest fears floating amongst attorneys is the lawyer-client relationship in an AI-driven world. How can AI enhance client communications and transparency without eroding the human touch that is essential in the personal injury advocacy or law in general?
So I think what you have to do is you have to have a conversation with yourself about what you are outsourcing to AI. And you need to determine like what activities are activities that don't require a personal touch or they don't require your skill. I think that the real fear, like I said earlier in the podcast, that older generations have is that this will cause skill eroding, or that it will cause you to have maybe not as great of a connection with your client. If you're trying to use AI to like communicate with your client, like to generate an email that you haven't really generated, or you're trying to use AI to give a video message that is not really you. I think that right now, from my practice, because I don't have a volume practice, we wouldn't dare use any of those things. I mean, my clients and our clients, we're on a first name basis with, and we talk to often. But I could see how if you had a volume practice, this might be the best way that you communicate sometimes. When you use an avatar, it is way easier to get a message to somebody. You're literally just typing it out and then the video will generate and then you could send it to them.
And as you know, like I personally enjoy really the fun videos or reels of some law firms. So, some law firms just do it to lighten up because, law practice in itself is very serious and could be stressful. And many people don't like learning or listening to the law particulars because it can be very boring, very specific niche. So, it could be used for reels. And I've seen several of them and I really like them.
Now, you mentioned confidentiality here. This is a problem with generative AI. So I don't know that there's any problem with sending an avatar message to a client or have a generative AI email like sent to a client. I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about, though, are things like you uploading your client's medical records to ChatGPT, or you uploading anything else that's confidential. There are articles, and I think there's been some cases where there has been a discussion about what you are waiving when you input confidential information into ChatGPT. And I don't want to speak like I'm an authority on this. I can speak enough to tell you that there is real concern that you cannot when you upload something to ChatGPT, and particularly when you're not using closed forms of that program, that the material you're uploading can somehow be trained into the model and be released. I have not heard of a specific case where this has occurred, that someone has been caught, but I think that you don't want to be the first test case for it.
So this could be a good question to somebody who builds the actual AI programs, because they know if it's end-to-end encrypted or if it's wide open, right?
Right. And when we were talking about those industry-specific LLMs, those are, for the most part, end-to-end encrypted. They're called closed systems for a reason. So when I mentioned Supio and Even Up and Anytime AI, those systems are closed off from the internet. And so the learning language model isn't like uploading it where other people can see it necessarily. And that's why those are safer options. But my concern is that some lawyers, human beings being human beings, that ChatGPT is much cheaper. And in some cases, it's more effective than these other utilities. And so people, I think, get creative about how they're uploading things sometimes. And I'm just here to say that you need to be very careful when you're doing that. And in fact, ChatGPT itself, I'll say this to your users, has some options for some subscription packages where they're at least claiming they're HIPAA compliant. You should look into those for your firm. I think they're called Enterprise and Teams are the names of those packages. So look into them.
Amazing. Listen to Nathan. Okay. We barely touched on, a little bit touched on medical records. Let's talk about that for a minute. How does AI handle medical records and impairment assessments and also causation analysis in personal injury cases? And what limitations should lawyers recognize? Because as we know, it's far from perfect as of today. And today is what, August 29, 2025?
Causation is something I would never outsource to AI. That's an attorney judgment issue. That's a high level concept that like they teach in law school. I don't think it's wise to use AI to at least generate a causation. If you want to use AI to think deeply about causation, like let's say you want to have a dialogue with generative AI about what you believe causation to be in your case, and you want to develop that thought with AI. Like, in other words, you're not going to trust what it's saying, but you're going to think with it. This is another skill that people who are not using ChatGPT and LLMs on the regular don't know what I'm talking about. But there's a skill to sort of using AI as almost like a sounding board for ideas. And I'm okay with that as long as you're using it for just that. As long as you're using it for just that, you're not outsourcing your legal judgment, then I think it's fine. In terms of medical records, it does much better job with summarizing medical records because my understanding is that the first industry-specific LLMs were kind of trained and designed to interpret medical records. That's why they handle them so well. And so it is very, very, very useful to use these tools to sort of analyze and develop medical chronologies. Where I feel strongly is that I would not use these utilities to make assessments or judgments that an attorney really needs to make about whether or not you should move forward with a case, where the value of a case is. It's fine if you use them to help you think. It's fine if you help them use them to gain some information here and there, but I would never rely on the tool to make that determination.
I couldn't agree more. Nathan, I would like to touch on Atlanta and Georgia specific considerations. How might state and local rules, ethics opinions, and courtroom practices shape AI adaptation or adoption in personal injury litigation?
So my understanding is the State Bar of Georgia has a committee that is closed, that is looking into sort of making like ethical changes to our rules of ethics and things like that based on generative AI and to provide guidance. I don't know that committee has written anything yet, and if I'm mistaken, I'm sorry. I do know that there are some judges in Fulton County that have issued standing orders. I think Judge Swall is one, that basically are making attorneys who submit work product identify whether they use generative AI to write the work product, and then they have to further certify whether or not they have humanly verified the work product. And at some point, we should talk about what human verification of the work product actually means. But on the local level here in Georgia, that's what we're seeing. I'm sure that there's some other judges who are developing standing orders. And I think personally, that's where you're going to see this first. You're going to see judges start issuing standing orders, or maybe even put in their scheduling orders, things about AI and generative AI. And that's where you need to start looking. That's at the state and local level. I think that's where you're going to start seeing restrictions on use.
Very interesting. Very good, valid, amazing points. How might AI generated materials influence jury understanding? That's another very hot topic. And what measures do you believe, Nathan, can ensure authenticity and resist manipulation or misinterpretation?
So when it comes to a jury, what comes to mind is that you would use AI probably to generate demonstratives, AI generated videos, things like that. We had a case one time, I don't want to go into the details of it, where Joe and I actually looked at creating a virtual reality environment because the scene where this catastrophic injury occurred was very unique and unusual. And it would be difficult for most people who were witnessing it to understand it. And so if you have a case like that, I could see that maybe you could make an argument for using generative AI as a demonstrative. But I think that the rule, and I've never looked into this question, but my instinct is that as long as witnesses are verifying that it is a fair and accurate representation of whatever it is, that some judges may allow that. And then they would say that the court, that the defense could maybe point out that it was generated with AI. Maybe that goes to the weight of it instead of its admissibility. But I don't know. I don't know how judges are going to handle that. And I think right now, what you would find is they handle it very differently across the nation. If you have a judge who's more of a Luddite, who doesn't like technology, he's probably going to say they don't want it in. If you have a judge who is a bit more open to technology, and you've got witnesses that say it's a fair and accurate representation, they might let it.
Where does AI source its information? Public databases, maybe publisher content, firm data? Who owns the outputs, and how do we manage licensing and attribution of legal work product?
So this is a bit outside of my area of expertise, but from what I know is it draws on everything. That's the problem with it, is it's all encompassing. It. When we were talking earlier about SEO, Google content, things like that, I think the issue is people don't understand the scope of all the things that it's drawing on. It's not just drawing on Google reviews. It could also draw on like literal verdicts that are being reported in newspapers. Or things that are on FindLaw, or things that are on LinkedIn even. And I think that it just broadens the scope. My understanding is that it's a broader net of things that it can sort of incorporate in. And I don't, in terms of managing licensing and attribution of legal work product, I do think that what attorneys have to worry about is if you think that you have a unique process, and a lot of us do, you need to be very mindful of what you're uploading to the general use LLMs, because they will train off your documents. So we have documents here at our firm sometimes that we have that are internal, have our internal processes on them, and we don't upload those to the LLM because the LLM theoretically could borrow it and take our work product. And so I think attorneys need to also be considering that when they're uploading things to ChatGPT.
Very good. I like the way you said borrow. Absolutely. Be careful of that borrow. Do national firms have advantages in AI deployment for personal injury practice? And how can smaller or maybe mid-market firms compete ethically and effectively?
So I think a lot of national firms that have a lot of resources, they're building their own closed AI systems. They are bypassing the industry specific systems that anyone can purchase, and they're just straight up. I sat next to a partner on a plane at Hunt. It was one of the law firms, one of the big firms in downtown Atlanta, has a national presence, and they were telling me that basically all the major defense firms are building closed LLM systems. They're doing this alone for things like e-discovery, but they're spending their money on systems that are tailored to their firm and their needs. And I think that the advantage of that is that maybe that they are developing software that may be more efficient for them, but obviously it's very, very expensive for them to do that. And I think that the utilities that are offered by the the closed systems, the industry specific systems like Supio, even up, Anytime AI, counsel. I've left any out. I'm not trying to not promote them. I think that more like mid-market firms probably should look in those spaces. I think that Lexus's Protege program has a lot, or Lexus, for example, has a lot that it offers with Protege in terms of being able to draft briefs and draft parts of briefs and things like that. And I think that those are also utilities that mid-market firms should look into that can help them be competitive with a big national defense firm that has a closed LLM system.
Nate, what practical tips would you provide for attorneys new to AI?
The best tip I can give you is a cliched one. And that tip is this: use it in your personal life as much as possible, because it will help you develop ways to use it in your professional life. I started, because I'm a nerd and goofy, I started making AI like comics, and I started making them more elaborate. I use a like blueprint long prompts, to sort of develop, like kind of complicated comics about what's going on in my personal life. And in doing this, what I've noticed is that it's causing me to work with prompts. It's causing me to talk to ChatGPT, and it's causing me to learn terminology like workflow, auto branching, RAG, all these things that like you may hear, but you don't really understand what they are. If you start using AI in your personal life with fitness, for example, you'll start learning the skill of using it. And so that's my best advice I can give to somebody is whatever you know about in your personal life that you care about, whenever you have to make a decision, you need to know what workout to do today. Run it by it and start talking to it like it's a real person. And I think you'll get oriented toward it. You'll start seeing, oh, in my practice, maybe I could do this or that with it.
Do you feel, Nathan, in your personal life, did AI become your best friend yet?
I wouldn't say it's become my best friend. What I will say is if you have the Pro plan and you have the advanced conversation feature of ChatGPT, which I have here, it is amazing in how human-like it is. I mean, like it truly, if you were a lonely person, you could have a conversation about just about anything with it, and it replicates a human being almost perfectly.
And it's so much better than the Amazon. What is the Amazon thing?
Oh, I don't know what their conversation.
Because that one is already old-fashioned and outdated.
But because of this feature, because it's so good, I think people are oversharing. This is to tie it back into things that lawyers have to worry about. A lot of times clients now are like full on seeking emotional like support advice or mental health advice from ChatGPT. I know people think that's ridiculous, but once they realize they have this bot they can talk to and have a full on dialogue with, they'll say everything. What we don't know as lawyers yet is whether that is still privileged. You know, when you say to ChatGPT, I'm depressed, I got anxiety, I'm worried about this court case, all these things. Well, the question becomes, yeah, it's a closed account, but it's going into a learning language model that can be theoretically trained. And so when that defense lawyer sends you the RPD, hey, as your client having dialogues with ChatGPT, it's kind of an open question. I mean, I would certainly argue that it's not something that's discoverable, but something you need to think about.
Good point. Thank you so much, Nate. Again, if somebody is looking for your expertise in artificial intelligence when it comes to law or needs your assistance with tracking case, how can they find you?
You can go to our website at friedgoldberg.com. We have breakfasts and seminars and trial skills clinics that I'm frequently speaking at. And you certainly can look me up on any of the organizations directories that I talked about earlier, AAJ or AT.
Okay, and are you on any social media?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram and so on and so forth. But
very good.
You can reach out to me there too.
Amazing. Again, thank you so much for talking to me today and finding time to discuss this very hot and very important topic about, specifically about AI's rising role in personal injury law, the current tools, ethical use, accuracy, and practical implications for firms of all sizes. But before we conclude today's episode, as mentioned, I have a fun pop-up question. You ready, Nathan?
Yes.
Okay. what are the strengths of a human being that you value the most, and the weaknesses that you simply cannot stand?
This is a great question. You shouldn't ask me this question. I'd say that I think I have to think about this in the terms of law, because I tell as I've gotten older, the most important strength of a lawyer is their consistency. It is really hard to replicate a good result. And the only way that you can do that is through discipline and daily discipline. There's a reason why I think that Joe and Michael have been so successful. And that is because they are some of the most disciplined individuals I've ever seen. They probably wouldn't agree with me describing them that way, but they work very, very hard, and they're very, very consistent, as you can see in their results. And so to me, when I'm working with a paralegal, that translates to all levels and roles in a law firm. When I'm working with a paralegal or an associate attorney or whatever, the most important thing is that they're reliably consistent. I'll tell you what's annoying. What's annoying is the person who is capable of doing really good work, but it's horribly inconsistent. Because unfortunately, if the paralegal that comes up with like the great, maybe they found, through internet research, some great cross-examination material, but they cannot request medical records. That person is not as useful to me as the person who is consistent. So that's what I would say.
I love it. Thank you so much again. That was trial attorney Nathan Gaffney with Fried Goldberg. I want to thank you all for watching and listening to our episode today. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury law related topics, follow us on moreinjuryfunding.com and of course on all social media. And we cannot wait to see and talk to you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.